Hey, Tim from the future here. This video is not meant to be a comprehensive talk about A-Trac. It's more of just my thoughts on it as I was driving. And we cut it from that last video just because it would have been super long video if we left it in. So if that sounds good to you, stay tuned. And if not, we'll see you on the next one. One negative of the A-Trac that we'll maybe get a show right here actually
I'm
is...
gonna hop out of the vehicle now.
But
Take this off.
so left foot braking is something I love. It's a class I've taught a million times, and it's one of my favorite sort of tricks you can do with any truck to just get through things more smoothly, more controlled. If you don't have A-Trac or an electronic traction control system, or you don't have lockers or Detroit lockers or any sort of locking diff, using a left foot brake situation can help you gain a little bit of traction. It can throw some power to the wheel that's on the ground instead of just the one in the air getting all of the power. But in trucks with electronic traction control, most of them, certainly the Toyotas, if you try and left foot brake while you're giving it throttle, it kills A-Trac. It thinks, I don't know what you're trying to do. I don't know why you're giving me throttle and brake. We're not gonna throw A-Trac into the mix and screw things up further. And so it sort of limits you. Some of the newer trucks, and maybe the Toyotas too, I know Land Rover, they get what left foot braking is. For all of Land Rover's possible issues, the people who are the trainers and the developers love off-roading. And so you can do left foot braking, give it throttle, and the traction control will still do its thing. It understands what you're doing with the left foot, sort of controlling yourself going over boulders and through rocks. So with this, we'll see if we even need A-Trac. This is just a bit of a ditch. Kelsey's getting the outside view, and we'll see if we can just lose traction enough to make the A-Trac work a little bit. Just going into a little bush. Let's see if I need it. Nah, didn't even do A-Trac because the rear wheel travel is so good. We just articulated the rear, and that got us up. We'll find a good example for you here. So for me, I just have to remember with A-Trac a couple of things. One is that it doesn't allow for any braking, and two, you have to be very consistent with your throttle. If you're trying to get A-Trac to get you up something and you're getting frustrated, more throttle, maybe less, more, less, more, it's constantly recalculating how much throttle you're putting in. And so if you can be consistent, it can do its job and get you through it. So what I found is if you have your foot on the throttle and you hear A-Trac doing its thing, but you're not moving forward, do a little bit more and then stop and see what it does. And if the whole truck starts moving forward, just let it do its thing. If that's still not enough, if there's just a lot of beeping and the calipers are doing their thing, a little more throttle. But you got to give it a second to sort of recalculate. Okay, with this much throttle, it's safe if I do this on the brakes and I get this truck to move through. So when I say doing the brakes, essentially, A-Trac is trying to stop the tires that would wildly be spinning on an open diff truck, and this is open diff, but the electronics are basically saying, I sense this tire is spinning more than the one over here, so that one must have traction. We'll put the brakes on this one, and mechanically, that power has to go somewhere, so it goes to the one on the ground, which we want. And so A-Trac's really good at doing that if you know how to sort of treat it. But we see people a lot of times in classes going, I'm trying to get up this rock face, I'm flooring it, I'm letting off, oh man, it's not working. So try and treat your foot like a hand throttle. Dial in a little bit of RPM and go, that's not enough for it. Dial a little bit more, and then if the truck's starting to move, you might just need a little bit more to get it to fully move up the obstacle. So it's enough ranting about A-Trac. Okay, we think we have another one that could use A-Trac, so we'll see. There's definitely some stuff ahead that'll do it if not.
I'll go to the front because the GoPro.
Thank you very much. One thing about this truck I've noticed, it's so wide. Yes, 200s are big, but it's so big that it feels very stable. Like side hills on this, in this truck, between the KDSS and the width of it, and especially because we've left the roof clean, you really don't feel like it's gonna tip over or want to tip over. It feels really nice and low and stable, and I do love that. We end up doing a lot of Jeep roads, sort of shelf roads, UTV roads when we're mapping. Here we go. Okay, so there's A-Trac, right? It's doing its thing, but it's not enough. So a little more throttle, stopping there, and you can feel it moving forward. So I knew I was good. I don't need to mess with it anymore. It was literally just a bit more. And then the moment you sort of feel the tension in the truck, like we've made it over the precipice, let out of the throttle. And if you're wrong, and it starts rolling back or it stops where it's at, you can always dial back in a little more throttle and then give it another 2 seconds or whatever of time. But yeah, that worked perfectly. That was a really good example.
Yeah.
Just because it was on the cusp of the amount of throttle I was using to climb up it wasn't enough. So I let it do its thing to explain. And then that, what, 10% more throttle or whatever was perfect.
Totally.
I love this truck. I really do.
It's so good.
It's so good. It just feels like, for such a sort of bubbly, modern looking thing, you realize back in its bones, big bones, it's still just a pretty simple truck with a few tricks up its sleeve. And those tricks are really the A-Trac and KDSS, you know.
Yeah, I did not expect it to feel as capable as it is actually, because it looks like such a luxury giant thing that I've been really impressed with actually how capable it is.
And it just feels so planted, you know. I was just mentioning how you don't feel like it's tippy.
I have yet to feel tippy in this car actually.
Yeah, I mean, it's because it's as wide as you know, a 90s Toyota is long.
Yeah,
but
that's one downfall. It's very wide. But it does have a really good turning radius actually for how big it is.
And I have to say, after wheeling a manual transmission for the last few years, between the 40 has always been manual, of course, and then you've got Dusty, the HDJ80 Multec, being a manual. I love manuals, but it is really fun just to drive an automatic off-road. It's so smooth. Yeah. All right, another shot, another step up. Okay, here we go. So this is a bit of a rock step up right here, and then a bit of an articulation, and then a longer sort of rock hill. This trail is great though, because although there's a lot of sand, beneath the sand it's granite. So if you spin a tire and it cleans the surface off, right beneath it is super grippy granite. So let's see. There we go, a little A-Trac in use. I didn't add any throttle there. It was just the amount I was driving with was enough to do it. And then, you know, once this big beast is on that granite with fresh tires that are nice and grippy, easy. Okay, so we got a good step up coming. You know, it's just one of those things. I'm trying to hit it at a slight angle so we don't rub our front bumper, because we've not trimmed our bumpers yet in terms of how high they hang down at all. So that was a lot of fuss, but all A-Trac. So look on my face is slight annoyance, and that is where good old 80 series is better. But it did it, didn't it? So that's just one of those things. A-Trac is loud, it's annoying, it screams and yells, but you just go up stuff, so it's great. And that's what this truck is about, honestly, is using that newer technology to do what it does. But I'd be lying if I didn't say sometimes I just want that good old rear locker button. Front, we almost never used anyways, so a rear would be really nice, and these trucks come with a rear locker. Our friend in Guatemala, Juan Carlos, he sent me video of his new acquisition, and it's the V8 turbo diesel, not twin turbo, not intercooled, so it's the low spec version, but he's got that, and it has a rear locker and that diesel. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. And I have to admit, how can you not be a little jealous that you know that truck exists out there in the world, but you can't have it? So we're articulate it a little bit. And step up nice and slow. One thing I didn't talk about, and this, remember, these are all just my opinions, so you can write angry comments below, that's okay. Crawl control. You know, I love that they added it. I love that it's more toys, more features directed at people like you and I. But whenever I've used it trying to get up something, it tends to squeak and jerk and yell and do a lot more of that than when I just use my own foot and let the A-Trac do its thing. And descending, I think if it was something that's literally impossible for me, with my foot can only actuate the brake pedal, right? And the brakes work on all 4 tires. If it's something like, let's say I came over a hill and there was ice, I think I'd put A-Trac on like the fastest setting, which is still pretty slow, and let it do its thing and see if it can, by using specific corner braking, do better to keep me from sliding down snow or ice, or maybe really slick mud. But in general, you know, I much prefer first gear, letting the engine braking do its thing, assisting with the brake pedal, and then if you're climbing something, just that really consistent throttle motion with my left foot ready to grab something with the brake if it does something weird, starts to tip, starts to slide back, whatever. But so for me, I love that crawl control exists. It's another toy, and I think there are situations where it'd be useful. But for me, I foresee 90% of driving never touching it. Every time I do turn it on, and we didn't get video of it, but on the descent I went, yeah, let's see what it does. And it's such a fuss, and it's trying to do a lot. I get it. But for me, I really think the only time it'd be useful is when it can literally do something I can't, which is put the brakes on specific wheels. So yeah, figured I'd mention my curmudgeon views of crawl control. I do love this transmission selectable. So like on Goose, you had L, which is first, and then what, second? Man, this is sad. I can't remember what an 80 series automatic has, but you know, you have a few gears and then it's basically drive. I do love that on this you can just bump from first. Now it's smooth enough, second gear.